All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I should also start off with a big happy World Ocean Day to everyone. So June 8th, World Ocean Day, we're going to celebrate our ocean all week long with events. So if you check out exploringbytheseat.com, you will find that we have 19 or 20 or so live events this week where we can meet scientists, ocean scientists, and explorers all over the world. We're going to go on some really exciting virtual field trips to Costa Rica and the Florida Keys. So lots of fun stuff happening through Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants this week. So really excited to be kicking off Ocean Week with eXXpedition. So they run pioneering all-female sailing research expeditions to investigate the causes and solutions for ocean plastic pollution. Today we're connecting with Sally Earthrowl. She is the mission leader for Around the World Expedition. She's a keen environmentalist, adventurer, and geography teacher. When she lived and taught in Bali, Indonesia, she witnessed firsthand the devastating impacts of plastic pollution, but she also saw the power that passionate people can have who want to make a difference. So since 2018, she's been with eXXpedition, sailing and carrying out scientific research around the world into plastic pollution. Sally, it's so great to have you joining us live today. It looks like you are out on the ocean, just having a great time, and we're excited to share a little bit of that with you today.
Great, excellent. Thanks very much. I'll just start setting up, sharing my screen. There we go. Oh, I've totally lost my presentation, which isn't very good.
That's okay. It's a Monday morning. Well, here in Canada anyways, it's a Monday morning.
Yeah, I've had all day to...
You can't expect technology to cooperate right out of the gate.
It was here a second ago. Oh, here we go. There we go. Excellent.
All right, looks good.
We've got share computer sound. Right, excellent. Well, happy World Oceans Day, everyone. I hope you can all see the screen. I'm Sally Earthrowl, and as Joe said, I'm the mission leader for eXXpedition, which is an amazing project taking all-female sailing crews around the world, carrying out scientific research into the issue of plastic pollution, both on land in the places that we visit and when we're out at sea, as well as doing lots of outreach and education events along the way as well. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into what life's like and the adventure of sailing across some calm seas and some rough seas, some of the wildlife that we get treated to, such as this dolphin behind me, and lots more. So I look forward to your questions at the end, and I hope you enjoy. So I'll start off with a video about what we're all about.
North of Sierra, south of Sierra. Cyclonic, becoming northwesterly 5 to 7. Decreasing 4 to 7. Showers.
Every day I wake up, I choose love, I choose light. Every day I wake up, I choose love, I choose light. Every day I wake up, I choose love, I choose light. Every day I wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
We now know there are over 5 trillion fragments of plastic floating on the surface of our ocean. There are many times that have sunk to the depths, so deep in a place that we can't even measure them. Trying to clean up these microplastics is the most enormous challenge, and the solutions start upstream on land. eXXpedition Round the World is an all-women sailing voyage studying plastic and toxic pollution. Over 2 years, 300 women will sail 38,000 nautical miles, exploring 4 of the 5 oceanic gyres and the Arctic. We have 3 main goals. One is to do solutions-focused science. We need to get out there and understand what type of plastic is in our ocean, and therefore where is it coming from, so that we can stop it on land. Secondly is about communications. We all know we have an issue of plastic in our ocean, but we need to move that narrative along to actually talk about what that problem is. The fact that it's microplastic and the fact that it's sinking means it's so hard to clean up. And thirdly, it's about building an army of inspired change makers. These 300 women who've been out there, seen the problem for themselves firsthand, understand what the solutions are and the role that they can play in solving it. What we realise is there's no silver bullet solution to solving the marine plastic issue, but we need to be working from every angle, from every sector to solve the problem here on land.
Is eXXpedition around the world, and although we said we'd take 2 years, we're actually going to take a little bit longer. We've currently sailed 10,330 nautical miles all the way from the UK to Tahiti, and we've been through 2 of those 4 oceanic gyres that we were aiming to go through. But I'm going to start off by telling you that I haven't always been found on board a sailing boat. And growing up, I never thought that I would have spent half my life out at sea carrying out this scientific research, but it's a great privilege that I do get to go and do that. But it was living in Indonesia that first made me realise what a huge issue plastic pollution was. On every street corner and on all of the beaches, there was this waste, and it made me question where it was coming from and where it was going to. And I was really lucky to be a teacher in Indonesia and have a platform and an amazing group of students that were really keen to find out more about this issue alongside me and improve our knowledge. They were really inspired by the world around them, and they really therefore wanted to take action to make a difference. And it was them that then made me realise that the power of people is really massive in us actually protecting our planet and changing our behaviours. And I'll talk more about some of the solutions later on in the talk. But it's then from Indonesia that I started to realise, although I'd always been a geography teacher and I'd known about kind of environmental issues, that plastic, amazing. It's something I'd used all my life. I dread to think how many toothbrushes I've used and thrown away, because every single one of those toothbrushes is probably still here somewhere on planet Earth, whether it's still in toothbrush form or broken down into those tiny bits of microplastics that we now found in our landfills and out floating on the surface of our ocean. So I became really passionate about wanting to try and do something even more to educate myself, but also to help educate others and spread the word and empower people to want to make a difference. So I joined eXXpedition, and this is me here. We'd just set sail from Hawaii, and we were sailing all the way over to Vancouver in Canada. And it was my first bit of deep ocean sailing. I'd been around the coastline before where we'd anchored at night more often than not, but this involved sailing 24 hours a day and not seeing land for about 2.5 weeks. So it was a very, very different experience. But before we'd even stepped on board, we started on land. We were very aware that actually, although this waste might end up in the ocean, it actually comes from land and from us humans. So we decided to sail, as I said, from Hawaii to Vancouver. And the reason being is that it took us straight through the middle of what's known as the North Atlantic Gyre. So there's 5 accumulation zones of plastic on our planet. This one, the North Pacific Gyre, is better known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So you may have heard about it before. And it was pretty vast, and it was pretty shocking to see what we saw when we were out there. But we started off on Oahu in Hawaii, which was just to the south of this mass accumulation zone. And we were shocked by what we saw on the beach.
Today we're on the east coast of Oahu, and we're looking at what plastic is washing in. Oahu, one of the Hawaiian islands, really sits on the edge of the North Pacific Gyre that we're going to be sailing to next week. The plastic on this beach, it literally could have come from anywhere across the Pacific. America, Canada, Asia. A lot of it is single-use plastic, a lot of containers. Right here we've got a toothbrush. We've got a couple of pieces here which are interesting. You'll actually see along here that there are some teeth marks. Today's been brilliant because it's the first day that our eXXpedition North Pacific crew have all come together. The crew is made up from amazing women from all over the world. We have 6 different nationalities, but most importantly, a really diverse skill set. We have got journalists, artists, scientists, teachers, filmmakers, policymakers, and product designers. So people who can both look at the challenge, share that message, and also think about solving it.
So we're sailing out across this ocean to look for this. In Bali, in Indonesia, I'd seen a lot of waste on the beaches, but as you saw in that very first video of me showing the waste moving down the waterways at the side of the road, it was identifiable items. It was crisp packets and bottles and bags. Whereas on this beach in Oahu, it was tiny bits of microplastic that had been out in the middle of our ocean, and as Emily said in that video, could have come from anywhere. And it's the action of the sun's UV rays and the power of the waves and the saltiness within the water that help break down these items into smaller and smaller particles until they look something like this floating on the surface of our ocean, some of it sinking and some of it washing up on our beaches. So we made our way out to sea. As I said, it was my first time really sailing offshore, and we were sailing straight into the wind, which, if you can imagine, that means that we have some very choppy seas, and our boat, as you can see there, is on a very strong angle. And we were having to get our sea legs before we could carry out our scientific research. And getting our sea legs didn't only mean not feeling sick, which it took me about 72 hours to get over, but it also meant having to do our day-to-day activities on board. So, for example, cooking a meal, you're cooking for 14 people at any one point in time. And, you know, you're having to cook on a moving oven and a moving stove to kind of make sure that, you know, all the crew are fed so that we can be strong enough to sail through the waters and also to carry out our scientific research. So there's a great camaraderie on board and kind of companionship between all of those women. There's 14 of us in total. And as was said in the video, all from different backgrounds so that we can all bring a different perspective and different ideas to discuss this issue and the solutions to plastic pollution. And we'd been sailing about 7 days. We'd all now found our sea legs. And we started to reach this accumulation zone here, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And it's there that we started to really see the impact of our behaviour on land.
We've been sailing through the North Pacific Gyre for 7 days, and we can't believe what we've seen.
Plastic bottles, toothbrushes,
Plastic bags,
buckets and barrels, a lot of rope, more pieces of rope, nylon rope, the constant stream of small bits of plastic,
a cigarette lighter,
fishing crates, microplastic. We saw one huge fishing net tied up together, seeing these beautiful dolphins and then chunks of plastic next to them.
It's the sheer amount of pieces.
It's literally a plastic soup,
Large plastic lids for containers.
a washing basket,
half a toilet seat.
We saw a chair with all 4 legs.
All these items once belonged to someone, and they definitely don't belong in the ocean.
Started to see out in the middle of this garbage patch here in the North Pacific were identifiable items that had absolutely no place being out in the middle of our ocean. Seeing half a toilet seat was a bit of a shock, to be honest, along with bottles and bags and washing baskets, all sorts of things. But it really was those tiny bits of microplastic that I'll talk to you about a little bit later on when I go through our scientific research. But we then decided that, you know, North Pacific, we went through this amazing gyre, but actually there are 4 other gyres or accumulation zones. And that's when Emily and the team, we decided to run eXXpedition around the world. And I have been lucky enough to go on board some of those journeys, and we'll be stepping on board again when we pick up the boat again when the world opens up. And we're carrying out scientific research both on land and out at sea. We're working with Professor Jenna Jambeck and her team at the University of Georgia to carry out this circularity assessment protocol. And that involves us going along some different sampling sites, what we call transects, which are lines along either on the beach, on a street, in a car park, and measuring out a whole 100 meters and counting the types and the number of bits of litter that we find in all those places. So we can look at waste leakage. So sometimes we might put our waste in the bin and it blows out. Sometimes we know that not everyone puts their waste in the bin. Sometimes waste might make its way to landfill and it escapes somehow due to the winds or water, whatever it might be. But unfortunately, that means that there's a hell of a lot of rubbish and litter in our environment. And it's about looking at what type of litter it is and in what quantities, so we can look at how we can put in better waste management to be able to stop that from entering our environment and ultimately our oceans. So that's us carrying it out on land. We're also visiting various different types of waste management sites. So this is at the dump in Antigua, where we were last November. And unfortunately, this particular dump site that we were at was an unsanitary landfill. They did have a lined landfill, which was much better for the environment because it meant that all those chemicals and things that are created in when the litter's decomposing don't leak out into our environment. But that got filled up really quickly because everyone was using and creating lots of waste. So they had to just dump their waste in a big area. And this was very close to the sea. You can see beyond here actually the start of the mangrove forest, and you could see streams of kind of discolored earth going out into there. And we know that those are most likely chemicals and things going out into our ocean. So it's a real challenge for us to look at how waste is managed on land to really make a difference. But we're also looking at our scientific research out at sea. Now we know that there are 5 million fragments of plastic thought to be floating on the surface of our ocean. But we also know that there's much likely to be a greater amount of plastic out in our environments. We need to work out where it's going. We know it's breaking down into these small fragments, as you can see here in this sieve. But what we want to do on eXXpedition around the world is look at, for starters, our first thing we're doing is looking at sediment sampling. So we have this sediment grab here, which acts like a big hand going down. We lower it down to the surface of the seabed, and we pull up some mud. So you can see here the kind of gloopy mud, and then we store those and send them back to laboratory for testing. The second thing we're doing is we're looking at our subsurface sampling. So lighter plastic obviously floats on the surface of our ocean, but we know that that plastic is sinking. Some of it goes all the way to the seafloor. We don't quite have a submarine just yet, so we can't test out to see what it's like in the deepest, darkest depths of our ocean. We can only test the sediment close to the shore, but we can test the subsurface at 25 meters below the surface. And we have this contraption here, which we send down, and it has 2 lids, and both lids are open. As we send it down towards the bottom of the sea, to about 25 meters below the surface, we send down this gold weight, which snaps it shut. So we grab some water from that particular depth. And we then filter this water on the boats to make sure that we can again look at the micro and nanoplastics in those samples back in the laboratory, back in the UK at the University of Plymouth. We're also doing some air sampling, looking at the amount of microplastics and nanoplastics in our air, which is a bit of a scary thought because the air is what we all breathe. But one of the most interesting things we're doing for us to be able to see what's going on in our oceans are our surface trawls. So you can see here our manta trawl, and it's about 60 centimeters wide, and we take it across the surface of our ocean, and it's got a fine mesh net at the end of it. And we then bring that mesh net back up on deck and we study it. So you can see my concentration face here. We're studying it to look to see between the phytoplankton that we might pick up sometimes in organic matter and seaweed. There was a lot of sargassum seaweed, particularly in the Caribbean. Because it's difficult to see through the net, we then process some of that on board through a series of different sieves, and you can see some plastic particles here. But really, this is what's most shocking about what we find out in the middle of the ocean, because these microplastics are almost impossible to try and clean up. It's a bit like when you, for example, might break a beanbag accidentally and you've got those tiny bits of beanbag contents everywhere in your living room, and however much you might hoover it, it's really hard to clean up. And that's when we realise that although cleanups are a hugely important intervention to try and clean up our mess, basically, we also need to look upstream at the solutions and what we can do before this plastic waste and other waste even makes its way out into our ocean and starts to interrupt the food systems and the natural environment. So here's a little quiz for you. If you all look at the screen, you can start to have a think about which of those, this is looking down a microscope at a sample. And on here, there are 2 bits of plastic and the rest are organic matter. So have a think to yourself, try and pick out the 2 bits, and then I'm going to show you that they're these 2. And it's really hard to identify the difference between what's organic matter and what are plastic particles. So if you imagine it's hard for us to be able to determine that looking down a microscope, it must be really hard for the fish and the animals in the ocean. And unfortunately, as well as the images we see of animals and turtles and dolphins getting trapped and tangled in plastic waste, these animals are also eating this plastic and it's entering our food chain. Now, that's particularly concerning because obviously, over half of the world's population rely on fish as their main source of protein. The majority of our population live close to the sea. Therefore, this plastic is also entering our food chain. I know we're not necessarily going to be picking out and eating bits of plastic, but what happens is toxic chemicals adhere or stick to the surface of those plastic particles, as well as some toxic chemicals being used in production. So if you imagine what happens is that then as it goes through the food chain, it does something called biomagnify. And those toxic chemicals kind of get attracted to the fat particles in the marine life. And then, as the small fish gets eaten by the big fish and you go up the food chain, it ends up becoming a huger problem. And we know that these toxic chemicals can be found in our human bodies. Unfortunately, there's a lot of sources of these toxic chemicals. They may not all be from the ocean and from plastic, but we know that they do exist, stuck on the plastic surface, and we know that they can be found in us. So it's definitely something we need to think about in terms of preventing and taking action to make sure that we stop that plastic waste going into our ocean. And we do that at eXXpedition, not only by our education and outreach, but also by having 10 guest crew on board each leg. And we go through this process of really being out. You're out in the middle of the ocean. You really get a sense for just how vast it is, just how important it is. And you start to really feel how this issue is, something needs to be done about it. We then start to explore the different solutions. So we get thinking and we start to look at not only what the solutions might be, but what solutions might be most appropriate for us to take action for. And then we really think about setting action when we get back on land. So we set ourselves some targets and some challenges, and we think about our own communities and what they might need, and thinking about our own skills or superpower, if you like, so that we can really make the most of, you know, our own skills to make the biggest difference back on land. But it's not just this amazing eXXpedition crew that can take action. Yes, we've generated this fantastic community of change makers, giving school talks, going out into industry, and kind of doing all of that change, as well as looking at their own behaviours. It's up to absolutely everyone. About 70% of our oxygen comes from the ocean, from photosynthesis, from phytoplankton and things like that. So it's a really important resource that we need to protect, along with our nature and the animals that live there. And so we can all take action. And today, eXXpedition have launched Join the Shift. So a shift platform, and it's all about shifting your behaviours to take action. And there are hundreds of solutions that we've added to this platform that you can go and take a look at www.shift.how. And you can really start to think about where you might fit and where your personality and your skill set and your community intersect this issue of that solution, and how you can take action to make a difference. There's some great ideas on there, and there'll be some more education resources to follow on that as well. But yeah, you can see some of the ideas there and some of the resources that are available to help you jump on the bandwagon, if you like, and make that behavioural change easier for each and every one of us. So I hope that you'll check that out. But yeah, that's eXXpedition. I've been through some of the science. Obviously there's the sailing adventure and some solutions, but if you've got any questions, please do ask away.
All right, excellent. Well, Sally, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. It looks like just an incredible time out on the ocean, being away from land, but it also sounds like it's quite impactful to see even far away from land for days on end, you still find lots of evidence of what makes it into the ocean. So those tuning in via YouTube, use the chat sidebar, send us in some questions, and we'll start working some of those in. I do want to give a shout out, Sally, we have 4 continents joining us right now. We have Africa, North America, South America, and Europe, which is pretty cool. It's great to have a group joining us from different areas. A few quick shout outs. Let's see. We've got Edinburgh, Halifax in Nova Scotia, Chile and Peru, Connecticut. Yeah, very cool to see a great group joining us live. And let's start off with a question about your time in Indonesia. So you showed us those images, you showed us the video of the garbage kind of making its way to the ocean. And then you also talked about finding passionate people who wanted to do something to help. How supportive of the government for this issue, or is it something that is not a focus for them right now?
I missed most of that question, unfortunately, because of the connection, but I think you said something about the people out there, why they're passionate and if they're focused on it at the moment.
Well, you mentioned you met a lot of passionate people about the issue, and I was wondering if the government was on the same page or if they're slower to kind of adopt that this is a problem.
Yeah, so actually it varies between the different islands and the different areas, but there's an amazing, you've probably heard of Bye Bye Plastic Bags, an amazing pair of sisters who grew up on Bali, and they actually lobbied around the same time for the governor to bring in a plastic bag ban, and that got passed, I think, at the beginning of 2019. So Bali as an island itself is reducing its plastic waste by the sheer fact that those items are now banned on the island, and everyone seems to be taking that ban, or at least when I was there at the beginning of 2019, we're taking it very seriously. I was really lucky to be a teacher on the island and have an amazing platform to talk about this issue, and a really enthusiastic group of students who wanted to take action. So we work together on a bit more of a local scale, looking at the local community and bringing in kind of a single-use plastic savvy school, I like to call it, because it was a very difficult environment to bring in with the infrastructure there, to make it completely plastic free. The odd bit of single-use sneaks in every now and then, but generally it's a single-use plastic free school. And I know that there's other schools in Bali that do the same thing. There's also some amazing recycling programs such as Eco Bali that can take your litter away and actually put it into kind of recycled items, along with lots of bank sampa, which are the kind of plastic banks or rubbish banks where you can take your waste and get some monetary exchange for it. So there's lots of amazing initiatives that are taking place for sure.
All right. So I want to unmute the microphone here. We have an educator joining us from Ghana. Would you like to unmute for us?
Yes, please.
All right, there we go. Well, first of all, it's great to have you joining us live today. It's great to have your students joining us. It looks like they're grade 6 students.
Yes, they are grade 6 students.
All right, excellent. Well, I'd love if you want to introduce yourself, and if any questions from the students have come in so far, we'd love to grab a couple of them.
All right, good day, everyone. My name is Temi Tokwe Gray, and I'm a science teacher in Aurian International School, Accra. And our school is an advocate for plastic pollution. So we don't like it, and we are moving towards becoming a single-use plastic free school. So the unit my students are learning or exploring is about the environment and how the earth is just what we have, and we have to take care of it because right now there's no other place to go to. And the students made a summative assessment about their immediate environment and the human impact on their environment and the solutions and the challenges that are involved in even getting the solutions to work. And most of them also talked about plastic pollution. And if you keep on bringing up solutions here and there, the issue is there would always be challenges for these solutions. And as an MYP school, one criterion that we focus on in science is criterion D, reflecting on the impacts of science. And one of my students is now asking, why all these plastics? I thought scientists used to do environment impact assessments before they do anything at all. So why didn't they make this compulsory for people that produce plastics? If you are going to produce the plastics, tell us where it will end up in. If you don't have any solution for that, then don't even make it. So one of the questions they're asking is, how did all this start? What problem were they trying to solve that they started making plastics? And didn't they think of the challenges that this solution would bring? Another question they're asking is it possible to kind of make boundaries around oceans? The boundaries might not be that strong, but at least they would bar plastics from going to the ocean. Water can decide to flow over, but when water is going back to the ocean, there's this maybe mesh or something that wouldn't make plastics go into the ocean. They are saying that we might not be able to do much about the damage, but we can prevent more damage in that line. I don't know if you get it. I think based on the research they did in their environments, they've developed empathy for the situation. They are kind of angry too, and they want to make a change. But in an environment like Ghana, in Africa generally, you still have many illiterates, many people that don't understand. They don't have an idea of what plastic pollution is, and even when you tell them, they are not bothered. So it's better we tackle where it is coming from. So the source of plastics, companies producing it. If you cannot use something else, then maybe you shouldn't work at all, because we're looking at two evils. Which one is the greater evil? Which one should we avoid? Okay, so because there's so many people that have no idea about plastic pollution. So even going out and preaching about it, it might not get to their hearts. So if we rather focus on people producing it more, maybe something will happen. But right now my students are very angry. So I just like to know, I would like to know what the government is doing about this, because plastic pollution is something that has been said for a very long time now, and we're still talking about it even now. People are doing things, but it looks like as we are trying to solve it, there's more coming in and more coming in, and it's like we are doing something fruitless. So I'd like to really know what the government is doing. In Africa too, we have many non-governmental organizations working. They are campaigning against plastics and everything, but like I said earlier on, there are still so many people that don't have an idea and they don't care about it. So it's better we work with those people that are actually producing it and see how we can reduce the production of plastics. Thank you.
Great, thank you. First off, well done to your school starting on that journey to become single-use plastic free. That's great news, and it's brilliant that although they might be angry, which is never a great emotion, they're obviously passionate about their planet and want to take action to make a difference. There's a great analogy of that's been said quite a few times about walking. If you get home and your bathroom's flooded, what's the first thing that you do? Do you turn off the tap, or do you get the mop out and start mopping it up? And, logically, you would turn off the tap, otherwise you're going to be there all night mopping up the floor because that water is going to continue to be leaking. And it's exactly the same with plastic pollution. So I hear what you're saying about needing to stop that plastic pollution at the source and taking action. And it isn't just individuals that need to take action. You're right. It is governments, it is industry that we really need to start all looking at how we can change our behaviours to really make a difference. But it's not an easy challenge. You mentioned as well about, environmental impact assessments should have taken place, 60 years ago before plastic ever kind of leaked out into our environment. But that wasn't necessarily taken. And it's that age-old argument between economic development versus environmental loss, unfortunately, in a lot of countries. And plastic is an amazing product. It's durable, it's cheap, it's made amazing impact on healthcare and food sanitation. It's increased life expectancy, or contributed to the increase in life expectancy in a huge amount of different places. Yet it is having this massive degradation on our environment. And I think now that people are starting to sit up and take more notice, there are a lot of governments that are bringing legislation and working industry, and there are a lot of innovations that are starting to take place to look at alternatives to plastic that are better for the environment. Because it's not just, you mentioned about is there something, your kid was asking if there's something that you can stop that plastic getting out into the ocean for. Could there be some kind of barrier? And yes, they do exist. I know the ocean cleanup have been looking at putting some kind of booms across rivers to stop that plastic going out, and I know that I've seen some of those in practice when I was living in Indonesia and in some other places around the world as well, which is fantastic. But ultimately, they're also disrupting the ecosystem as well. You might be interrupting fish migration. And even if we did start to stop that plastic going out into the ocean, and that intervention is really important because it stops the bigger bits breaking up into the microplastics, actually, we're still producing the plastic. That's still producing greenhouse gases. It's still, causing other environmental issues as well. So we need to think really carefully and use that framework of an environmental impact assessment when we're starting to look at the alternative solutions, because ultimately we need to make sure that we don't create something that's going to be a great alternative to plastic, but actually still has a negative impact on our environment. So it really is going to take lots of brains and lots of creativity working together to make a difference on this. And that's why we try and encourage as many people as possible from different backgrounds to get involved with our program, because we really believe that everyone brings something to the table and there's no one solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give a huge shout out to those grade sixes. It sounds like you're passionate and want to know more. And I think, that's a big part of what you're doing too with eXXpedition, Sally, is education, highlighting solutions, and, giving people a platform and an opportunity to have make that change, be that change they want to be. Very cool. Well, we've got, let me see here. We've got a family that just joined us in St. Thomas. Let me turn on their microphone and see how they're doing. Oh, I'm gonna have to get you to unmute for me. There we go. How are you?
We're good. We just joined a little late, but we do have a question.
We love it.
What can we do as a family to increase recycling awareness? Because we think that we're using single-use plastic and we recycle frequently at our home, but how is it that so much plastic still ends up in the ocean, and how can we encourage people to recycle properly, and are we doing the right thing?
Yeah, recycling's a tricky one, because I think that I know growing up as a kid, and all through most of my adult life as well, I was religiously recycling without really realizing that actually hardly any of it was being recycled, and also that ultimately that recycled item has an end point as well, so it just kind of slows down from making its way out into the environment as opposed to going directly there. Recycling is still really important. One thing you can do is check out on the local council's website what they actually recycle. I know here in the UK, the council websites, the different councils, the different regions recycle different items and different types of plastic, and some recycle kind of the film, some don't, so it's worth checking out that what you're actually putting in your recycling bin can be managed by your local authorities. The second thing is making sure that you clean it before you put it in the bin. It sounds really simple, but if we're throwing away contaminated plastic items and other tins and things like that, it actually makes it really hard for organisations to recycle that in the first place, and it really reduces its value. The biggest problem with recycling is actually only about 9% of our waste gets recycled, which is a really small amount when we all think about how much we actually put in our recycling bin. So ultimately, although recycling is there, and there's other schemes like bottle return schemes where you can actually take a plastic bottle into a kind of reverse vending machine and get your money back, so kind of a deposit scheme on those bottles, things like that. Although they're brilliant and they are all part of the solution, because there are many, the best thing you can do is really try and avoid some of the unnecessary item and the unnecessary packaging in the first place. And I know it's tough, particularly when you've got family at home. But I don't know if you were online when I was talking about the Shift platform, but there are loads of ideas on that, which is www.shift.how, that you can kind of look at and see what solutions might be most appropriate for your family kind of environment and situation.
Thank you, that's great.
All right, and I can see the little blue hand that's come up again for our grade 6 class. So if you want to unmute your mic, if you have another question, go ahead.
Yes, the student is asking that why is biodegradable plastic so expensive? So I don't know if you know about
Bioplastics are a really tricky one, because when they first came out, they sound like they're the solution and they're amazing, but actually they're really tricky because they still have very strong polymers. So they have very strong kind of material that, even though they might be made from plants, to keep their durability as plastic, they still need an industrial composter to biodegrade, and that needs to be composted. It's normally about 40+ degrees Celsius for it to actually break down. So although they are, and I don't want to kind of knock down any innovation towards solutions, because I think it takes lots of steps to get to something that's really going to work. But the problem with bioplastics is, yes, they're expensive to purchase because they're not mass produced yet. But also they're not managed properly in most situations at the moment, because the systems just aren't in place and the infrastructure's not there. Not every, like I was saying earlier about the different regions and the different councils being able to recycle different items. Bioplastics is a different type of plastic. Therefore, it may be or may not be very recycled. They may or may not have faster to be able to do it. And the worst thing is that quite often those bioplastics end up contaminating the main recycling stream, which then brings down the quality of the rest of the plastic in that recycling stream as well, and brings down its economic value. So it's a really tricky one to consider, and probably one that maybe your class could look up as a little extra project to look at the pros and cons of bioplastics. You know, because it is a good discussion topic to have, because it seems like an amazing solution, but you know, it is one that needs to be considered in terms of its environmental impact as well.
All right. Another question here about being a guest on one of the expeditions, who then become the army of change makers. Is sailing experience a must, or can you learn on the adventure?
So it's not a prerequisite to have sailing experience. We try and get kind of use this multidisciplinary crew working together as one of the key contributors to stimulating change, because we're bringing lots of different ideas and perspectives to the table. So if we had everyone on board that was a scientist, or everyone on board that was a sailor, we're kind of narrowing down our breadth of different personality types, people from different backgrounds, different locations, etc. So it's not a prerequisite. There are different lengths of sailing voyages. So some of the ocean crossings might seem a little bit daunting for a non-sailor, but some non-sailors have been on them and absolutely love them. So as long as people have their eyes open that it is a challenge, there is no getting off the boat once you're on it and you're out at sea. You've kind of committed as soon as you set sail, that you need to make it all the way to when you meet land again. So yeah, and there's lots of information about that and what it's like on our website for people to consider.
Excellent. Well, Sally, a few things I want to say. First of all, thank you for kicking off our World Ocean Week by sharing your adventures and the great work of eXXpedition, because it is a complicated situation. There isn't just one simple solution, but I think the route you're taking of that, doing the science, communicating the results, and then creating that army of change makers, I think that is a powerful recipe to really make a difference.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, shout out to everybody who joined us. 4 continents joining today, which is pretty darn cool. I hope everybody can tune in later today. We've got more events starting at noon Eastern and running right till 3:30 p.m. today. So we hope to see more of your groups tuning into some ocean action today. For now, thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Sally. And we're going to sign off for now.
Thank you. Take care.